Hello and welcome to Granada Reports, live with the latest across the northwest.
Hello there. On the programme this evening,
all eyes on the government to act. The latest on calls for laws to be changed in the wake of the latest Manchester Arena inquiry report.
You scream and shout, particularly to your legal team, saying, how can this be allowed? And we're 5 years down the line, and it's torture.
making a difference in memory of Kelly, the Manchester Arena survivor, backing a campaign for all of us to learn battlefield techniques should the worst happen.
They're never going to get to you immediately, so for me it's something that everybody needs to know.
Also on the programme this evening.
Don't want to go for a beer with them? Not really.
Why Frank's not impressed by Wrexham's Hollywood owners as Oldham prepare for a huge FA Cup tie in Wales.
Actor Linus Roach joins us to tell us all about playing an older Harry Styles in the new film My Policeman.
And in the weather, after a misty, frosty start today, things really perked up into the afternoon with glorious spells of sunshine. Will it continue into the weekend? All the details coming up.
So please stay with us for all of that. First tonight, the calls for action after the release of a damning report into the emergency service response to the Manchester Arena attack.
It found a failure in communication between blue light services left the injured and dying waiting for help, which didn't come.
149 recommendations have been put forward by Inquiry Chairman Sir John Saunders to try to avoid such a catastrophe ever happening again.
Those are now at the door of the government, but it's not yet clear which, if any, will be acted upon.
Let's cross live to Elaine Wilcox, who's outside the arena tonight. Elaine, the families will now be wondering what difference this report will make.
Yes, Rob, this report is almost 1,000 pages long, and for the families, their biggest fear is that it's allowed to gather dust like many other reports before them. The chairman of this inquiry was crystal clear in his criticism of the emergency services, saying that the help simply didn't come for the injured and dying. But the report also revealed the attempts by Greater Manchester Police to hide their mistakes, and for the victims' families, that's unforgivable.
It's amazing how people try and go around the truth and brush things under the carpet. You scream and shout, particularly to your legal team, saying, how can this be allowed? And we're 5 years down the line, and it's torture.
Well, Lord Kerslake has said Greater Manchester Police for 9 months effectively failed to cooperate in his report into the failings that night, trying to keep to that false narrative that they'd done a good job when in fact there were monumental failings, and that cost the then Chief Constable Ian Hopkins his job.
I don't think there was a conscious attempt to cover things up, but there was a sort of culture of not telling the full story by individuals, and I think actually by the police as a whole. And it's no good to them or to anybody else to say it all went well when palpably we found it didn't go well.
Well, those fighting the injustice of Hillsborough know exactly what that feels like. They have long campaigned for a new law to compel the emergency services to tell the truth instantly after they've made mistakes. But a report by the then former Bishop of Liverpool has sat on the Whitehall desk for almost 5 years and still hasn't been acted on. Last night we heard apology after apology from the emergency services, and we're told they are a very different place to what they were in 2017. In fact, a training exercise just last week shows they are actually training and testing out their processes to deal with a marauding terrorist attack. But this report, it has 149 recommendations, and the focus now will be on government. And this report will go on the Home Secretary's desk, and as we know, she's very much in the spotlight. So if we can bring in our political correspondent, Leisha McNally, now live in Westminster. The families, Leisha, are demanding action, and what they want to know is just how high up on the list of priorities this report is for government.
Well, Elaine, we know those at the heart of government have read this report. The Home Secretary said it was a devastating reminder of the horrors of that night. And in a statement on social media wrote, "It's right that we reflect and work together to learn from this tragedy." She added, "I will carefully consider the recommendations made so far to strengthen our response." But the reason we haven't heard her say any of this on camera is she's been busy dealing with the ongoing migrant crisis, another major challenge politically. All this while the government gears up to deliver what could be one of the most difficult budgets in a generation. So it's a crammed in tray, and the Arena inquiry report has rather had to join the pile. But there are serious questions to answer. The Home Office was staying tight-lipped today when I asked if there'd be any kind of ministerial statement in Parliament when the House returns on Monday. But Greater Manchester MPs I've spoken to say they very much hope that will be the case. They want to hear more detail from the government about how they plan to respond, in particular those two changes to the law that you mentioned. Martin's law to make venues safer and what's been called the Hillsborough law to make public bodies more honest. Now, campaigners on both these issues have heard promises and promises over the years from different Home Secretaries and different Prime Ministers. But having seen the strength and resilience of the bereaved families over the course of this inquiry, you can be sure that whatever happens in here on Monday, their questioning is far from over.
Leisha in Westminster tonight, thank you, and thank you also to Elaine in Manchester.
Well, one man who knows about the authorities promising to act and not always doing so is Professor Phil Scranton. He was a member of the Hillsborough Independent Panel and headed up its research.
He joins us from Belfast tonight. Professor, good evening to you. You've seen how slowly changes happened over Hillsborough. Some still haven't. How convinced are you the Arena inquiry recommendations will be implemented?
Well, I think that when you look back at the history of Hillsborough and you're thinking at over 30 years, that it took so long for the families to get any semblance of justice and to have their stories not only heard properly but recognised after the Hillsborough panel, then obviously at the inquests that followed. I think that when you look at that, you really have doubts about how serious the services are in addressing the underlying institutionalised problems that exist. It is almost incomprehensible that the organisation at the Manchester Arena fell apart before it even began. I mean, if we start at the beginning, the issue that a man could walk into the arena undetected with a massive backpack carrying a bomb while the police were on duty, while stewards were on duty, was the first failure. But then what followed after the bomb had gone off was that people were left to their own devices to save lives and to help people who were so seriously injured that a major incident wasn't even declared.
So, Professor, do you think it is about the culture? Because there were people who said yesterday that nobody in the emergency services deliberately didn't help. It was something to do with the system.
It is in the culture. It's not in the culture of individuals, it's in the institutional culture. The difference between individuals who on the night did their best and the institutionalised practice that means that the services are not joined up. I mean, it's beyond comprehension that the services were not really working together. They were not tied together in a way that you would expect an integrated response to occur. That was, in my mind, was unforgivable. That you had a situation where it transpires that an emergency operation wasn't declared for over 2 hours.
And the voices of those who survived.
So the individual senior officer.
Absolutely, the voices of those who survived were a huge part of the voices of those who survived here. The voices of the bereaved were a huge part of getting to the truth of what went on. How vital are those voices now and in the future?
I think that now we've moved into a different phase post-Hillsborough and through a lot of the other tragedies and disasters that have happened. People will no longer be silenced, and particularly people who are primary witnesses. I mean, the thing that was significant about the Manchester Arena was that the primary witnesses became the primary responders trying to save people's lives. So they knew the truth of what had happened in terms of the failure in the emergency response better than anybody.
Professor Phil Scranton, thanks so much for your expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Well, if another terrorist attack were to happen, would you know how to save someone's life?
Perhaps one of the most shocking things to come out of the inquiry is that it could be at least half an hour before a paramedic arrives to help.
That would leave untrained members of the public to cope in the first minutes of the aftermath, minutes which are often crucial to injured people surviving.
Now, a scheme called Citizen Aid is hoping to empower all of us with essential life-saving skills, originally designed for use on the battlefield.
It's something one woman whose sister died in the attack has been campaigning for. She's been speaking exclusively to our correspondent Amy Welsh.
This isn't real.
Look after the casualties.
But it's a reality hundreds found themselves in when a bomb detonated at the Manchester Arena. Except most didn't have the first aid skills to help. The absence of ambulances in those first crucial minutes left concert goer Claire Booth feeling abandoned. She was there with daughter Holly and sister Kelly.
When we were brought up, we were told if in an emergency, call an ambulance and they will come and help. And those ambulances, they didn't come for us.
It was 3.5 hours before Claire and Holly were put in an ambulance, and the next day she was told that Kelly hadn't survived. Claire admits she didn't know what to do, and now she's determined to ensure better first aid training for all, starting with herself.
I didn't know that help would take a long time to get to me, and I didn't know any first aid or what to do to help myself or my family that were there.
This Citizen Aid first aid course was the brainchild of Brigadier Tim Hodges and aims to give civilians the same skills he learnt on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Our thought was, how do we ensure that the public gets the same benefit that we've been teaching individual soldiers, so they can look after themselves, they can look after each other, they can save lives until the professional emergency services arrive.
It was 21 minutes before the first paramedic arrived at the scene of the blast in Manchester, but the inquiry heard how a delay of up to 30 minutes should be expected.
The public might expect paramedics would be there within seconds or minutes. That is wholly unrealistic.
And that the public must plug a care gap which could be the difference between life and death.
Holly had a lot of shrapnel injuries, so she was bleeding from a lot of different places. She had a belt, improvised tourniquet put round her by a police officer, which was amazing. I think it may have been half an hour or so after that the officer did that, whereas if I'd have had this training before, I would have known to do it immediately.
Do you really think it should be down to the public, though, to plug that first aid gap? Isn't that the job of the emergency services?
Ideally, yeah, it's the emergency services, but I think they're never going to get to you immediately. So for me, it's something that everybody needs to know.
So why not start early?
I'm going to actually pack this wound out.
Oakwood Academy in Sheffield is Claire's old school. Kelly and Holly were pupils here too.
The skills that you're going to learn today, people did that for Holly. If they'd have not, she might not be here today.
And they've agreed to take part in a pilot Stop the Bleed Day to teach their pupils essential first aid.
We know that people bleed to death within 4 to 5 minutes if they've got a severe life-threatening bleed, what we call catastrophic bleeding. And in that amount of time, we need members of the public to have the knowledge and to have the enablement to be able to treat people.
First aid courses have traditionally involved things like CPR and the recovery position, but not blood loss, and that is something Citizen Aid want to change. Packing a wound and applying a tourniquet are simple life-saving skills, and they say teaching youngsters from a young age is essential.
You had to make a tourniquet on there to prevent bleeding, and you used cutlery like spoons, knives and forks, and a triangular bandage to wrap around the leg.
It's a really good skill to know, however hopefully I do hope that I never have to use it.
240 pupils took part in today's training, but Citizen Aid's target is 240,000, and if every school agrees, we'll soon have an army of first aiders.
Kelly was very, very vocal and very opinionated, and if she felt strongly about something, then she would do everything she could to get that out there. So I know roles reversed, she'd be sat here today, I know that.
And knowing these skills could save someone's life is the best possible legacy Claire could create for her sister. Amy Welch, ITV News, Sheffield.
Now, the man behind Citizen Aid is Major General Tim Hodges, who you saw in that report.
He's the Defence Surgeon General, the most senior uniformed medical officer in the British Armed Forces.
And it's those battlefield skills that could help save lives should anything like this ever happen again.
Sorry about that. He joined us a little earlier and told us what he made of the report.
Well, I think it's a landmark report, it's a sentinel report, and there are some very clear recommendations about how we can potentially reduce avoidable deaths in future incidents.
The report makes clear there will always be this care gap, as it's called, this 30 minutes or so when the emergency services can't get to a patient. How crucial are those minutes?
Well, those minutes are literally critical, and we must find a way of filling that care gap. And the people that can fill that gap are the people who are already at the scene.
And we saw in Amy's report the sort of skills that Citizen Aid can offer, can teach people, are very simple, straightforward. You've got your props here today, haven't you?
Yes.
Just tell us what kind of things you offer.
So we teach simple life-saving skills, and particularly around arresting severe bleeding. And the techniques for that are to pack and press. Now, if you don't have any equipment, it's okay to improvise. You could improvise as they did in the Manchester Arena with some merchandising equipment, with a t-shirt, and pack the wound and press into the wound. But if you have bleeding from a limb and you can't stop the bleeding with packing and pressure, then you can rapidly move to a tourniquet. And indeed, we have a simple rhyme that we can teach to school children. If I've tried to pack and press, or there is no other way to stop the bleeding more or less, I can use a tourniquet. Now, we do have a tourniquet with the Citizen Aid charity. It's called the tourniquet, but you can improvise with a man's tie, a lady's scarf, a shirt sleeve, any strip of clothing, and you wrap that clothing above the wound and tie it, and then tie in what we call a windlass. So it can be any piece of metal or wood, or in this case it's the tourniquet, and then we turn and keep turning until the bleeding stops, and it will be uncomfortable for the patient, and then we tuck that in to secure it. And that's the difference between using a piece of wood and using the tourniquet, that you can secure it, you've now got your hands free, and you can move on and treat another patient.
And those little bits of equipment are available. You can go on your website, on your app, and order those things.
You can, and there are also the public access trauma kits that Sir John refers to in the report, and these are equipment sets that we have co-developed with St John Ambulance and with National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, and have been endorsed by the Faculty of Pre-Hospital Care of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh as a standard level of equipment that can be available across the country in mass gathering venues or transportation hubs.
It's very simple and it makes so much sense. Thank you very much for coming in to tell us about it.
Thank you.
Amazing demonstration there. Really could save a life. To sport now, in the most inclusive World Cup in the history of Rugby League, with the women and wheelchair competitions taking place at the same time as the men.
To mark the start of the wheelchair tournament, Rugby League legend Ellery Handley joined in a game with children at Redwood Special Educational Needs School in Rochdale. The session is run by the Rochdale Hornets, thanks to funding from the National Lottery and World Cup.
The further we can actually spread the word and visually be able to see it and see people in the wheelchairs and the females game, I think that it gives people the opportunity across the country. This World Cup has been brilliant so far.
That session was great. It was a different and fresh experience because there's people in wheelchairs all their lives and I've always been walking. It's cool to see a new perspective.
How good is that like you say, that this is a sport for everybody?
I would say it is a sport for everybody because it's accessible by everyone.
The foundation is really proud of getting into SEND schools like this one today. This is our future, and if I can recruit one or two from this programme, then it's a massive success in itself.
In football, the FA Cup returns this weekend and round one has thrown two non-league rivals together.
Hasn't it just? Wrexham, owned by Hollywood stars Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, are up against Oldham, led by the flat cap-wearing man of the people, Frank Rothwell.
Chris Hall now reports on a fascinating clash of personalities.
Well, I'm the kind of guy who will never settle down.
Wrexham may have the Hollywood owners, but at Oldham, Frank Rothwell is box office.
Jules and myself, we've had 50 years of happy marriage. But we have been married for 52 years, haven't we?
The man who's pumped £13 million into his hometown club won't be asking Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney for an autograph.
I know they're film stars and people say, all the girls go, woo! I've not seen a film where they're in. I just don't know who they are. Ryan Reynolds is one of the highest grossing Hollywood stars of all time. Robert McElhenney is an award-winning American actor, producer and writer. Do I want to go for a beer with them? Not really.
Through their documentary series, the actors from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Deadpool have made stars of Wrexham's players, staff and fans.
What was the connection between you and Wrexham Football Club?
We had no direct connection. It was just a feeling.
What me and my dad thought was, because Wrexham's red, Deadpool's red.
That's the real reason, sorry. But Rothwell has travelled across the Atlantic in the opposite direction, the oldest man to row the 3,000-mile crossing alone. And like the Wrexham bosses, he models his own merchandise.
Now all the kids wear flat caps. Oldham sold out to flat caps in 10 minutes to the day we bought it. We want Oldham Football Club to become a place where there's multi-sports played, where people can come any night of the week and play their particular sports. We want it to become a sports town. Two of our netball teams are British champions here in Oldham. We want the National Netball Centre to be here in Oldham.
The Rothwell revolution has already brought about a change of manager, but while Oldham and Wrexham are currently fighting at opposite ends of the National League, Frank is in no doubt over which club has the brightest future.
When they've decided, I've had enough of this, and they flog it to some other investor, disappear. Oldham won't. Oldham Athletic is not going to go into the ownership of one person who's going to decide the future of Oldham Athletic. That is not going to happen again. These lads bought a football club for as cheap as they possibly could do so they could tell all the mates in Hollywood, oh, and I own a football club. I won't be there on Sunday, but if they are there on Sunday, I hope they say to my darling wife, Judith, are you, Judith? Come over and have 10 minutes crack with us.
Frank says a playoff spot is his major target for this season, and in the Cup, he's backing Oldham to tear up the script in front of the cameras and put on a show.
I roam around.
I really don't think Frank's impressed with them, do you?
Could be very interesting.
Yeah, just a bit. You can see Wrexham v Oldham live on ITV at 11:45 this Sunday. Now, we all know Coronation Street favourite William Roach, the programme's longest-serving star, with his 60 years playing Ken Barlow.
Well, his son Linus Roach has followed his famous father's footsteps into acting, and he's starring in the brand new film My Policeman. It's in cinemas now and available to stream globally on Prime Video from today.
Our entertainment correspondent Caroline Whitmore caught up with Linus, who plays an older version of Harry Styles' character, no less.
Action! What about third class? What about her?
Linus Roach, the last time we met was 10 years ago in Budapest when you were in Titanic.
Yes, they came to visit.
And here you are now in My Policeman.
I can't live alone.
It's set in the 1950s. You play Tom, don't you?
The story's set in the 1950s, but it spans 4 decades. So I play the older Tom. Tom is a policeman, all set to live a very conventional life. And he meets this lovely woman called Marion, who's a school teacher. But then he meets this man called Patrick, and he starts to fall in love with him. So I play the older Tom. I'm always here.
You're never here. I've never had you, not for myself. He was always in your life, in our lives.
Younger Tom is played by Harry Styles. I don't know what's happening.
Everybody knows Harry Styles at the moment. He is like the...
Who is he again?
Never heard of him.
Yeah.
You're from the Northwest. He was brought up in Holmes Chapel.
Listen, I'll take it. If my new sort of claim to fame is I'm the older Harry Styles, it's good enough for me. I mean, I'd rather be the younger Harry Styles, but they wouldn't go for that. I'm still waiting for Harry to invite me to go on tour with him and be the older Harry Styles on stage. I was very flattered. I really admire Harry a lot. I think he's a super talented artist and a very good example of somebody who's really found a way just to be himself as an artist. And I think that's part of his power. And I love the fact that he's branching out into film.
Hiding your lies.
You know nothing about being married to... Stop telling me what I'm supposed to think about it.
I think people are able to see a part of themselves in each of the characters. All of the characters have some really nice qualities, and they also have some flaws that, you know, we might hope not to have, but as humans, we all have them.
And I'm going to have to mention your dad as well. Like I said,
of course.
I can't not. I mean, he's literally across the studio from us here. He turned 90 in the spring of this year. He is a machine, Linus.
You know, I wrote a little song for him on his 90th birthday, and it was all about what's the secret. The key, though, I see, he still goes to work like, you know, it's the first day at work, and he wants to do his best. He's got an attitude of a young person who's got a lot of life ahead of him. And I think he has got a lot of life ahead of him because of that. And so he's a good example for all of us, actually. It gave me my first leg up into the business, the young Peter Barlow.
Peter!
Hello, Dad.
Who's to say we won't go back again at some point?
Good luck with My Policeman.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And I always look forward to coming back, and particularly the North. It holds a very dear place in my heart, you know?
We'll leave New York and head on back here.
Back to Burnley.
Back to Burnley. Let's get the weather now. Here's Emma.
Why do I need a shower? I've been out in the rain.
The faster you go, the sooner you'll be out. You'll save water too.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Hello there, very good evening to you, and I hope you enjoyed your Friday. We certainly saw plenty of sunshine. It was stunning this afternoon, and that's because we had the clear skies last night. I hope you made the most of it, because it's all downhill over the weekend. Well, it will be. It's turning quite unsettled and breezy as well, if not windy at times tomorrow. However, temperatures creeping up ever so slightly because the air will be originating from more of a tropical source. And if you're out and about tonight celebrating bonfire night instead of tomorrow, it's mostly going to be clear, dry and chilly. Light winds, although a little bit breezier later on, so just bear that in mind if you're lighting bonfires or fireworks. Rewinding then to the detail, you can see we're just in this slot ahead of the system which crosses tomorrow, and again I think it'll clear in time for tomorrow night and leave us with a drier night, but possibly slightly breezier tomorrow night than tonight, and then unsettled from the west there with bands of showers and heavy showers at times passing through, and a bit breezier into the start of the new week. If we rewind to the next few hours, you can see it's largely dry for the first part of the night. That's when the lowest temperatures will be, with odd showers still blowing in here and there, isolated mist and fog patches forming, but then actually the breeze starting to get up ahead of this system pushing in from the west, and also the cloud increasing too, so that will serve to lift our temperatures into tomorrow morning. Sun's up at 7:18, sets at 4:30, and really it'll be cloudy for many of us from the word go, and very wet first thing as well, but this rain will move through quite quickly with 20-30 mile an hour winds, gusts of 40 miles an hour in exposed spots, and then you'll see a clearance from the west across the Isle of Man pushing eastwards there, so not too bad by the end of Saturday. Bands of showers and plenty of sunny spells on Sunday, and temperatures creeping up. Bye-bye.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Emma, thanks very much for that. That's it for now, but I'll be back with the late news after news at 10 tonight.
Have a great evening and take care this weekend. Please enjoy the fireworks and bonfires safely, if those are your thing.
Absolutely. Go to an organised one. We tell you every year.
We do. We repeat this over and over.
Thanks for watching. Good night.
Good night.